Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health webinar series. We're just going to wait a few seconds for people to slowly roll in before we get started, but thank you all for joining us today. And the topic is gambling and gaming on campus, a hidden problem. So just some housekeeping things before we get started. Participants are all on mute while we are on the call, so that means you are on listen-only mode. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so feel free to type in your questions using the question function on your menu, and we're going to start taking them up around 1:45-ish. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website. The presentation slides are also available to download if you click under the handout function. And all of this is also going to be made available in the follow-up email that's going to go out tomorrow. We do have a short survey at the end of the webinar, so please take a few minutes to complete it as the feedback is really helpful for us. And my name is Perlin Ng. I am the Research and Knowledge Exchange Coordinator for the Center, and we are joined today by Travis Steinert from the Gambling Research Exchange Ontario. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And over to you.
Okay, so as I said, today's webinar is going to be about gambling and gaming and what are the implications for students that are living on campus or policymakers or officials that sort of work in this sphere. So let me just take a second and explain who I am. So I'm a knowledge broker and content specialist at Gambling Research Exchange Ontario. We are an independent, ministry-funded, not-for-profit knowledge translation organization. We're sort of an intermediary organization, so we're unique in the fact that the only thing our organization really does is knowledge translation and exchange, which is really, trying to connect people with other people and people with evidence. And so that's sort of what we do. And our vision is to eliminate the harms from gambling, and our mission is to create, translate, and disseminate knowledge to support evidence-informed decisions about gambling, including its potential for harm. So I just want to get that out of the way. A lot of people ask, do you work for the gambling industry, or what's your affiliation with that? And so I just want to let you know sort of where we're located. So the first thing I'd like you to do is really just take a step back and think about, gambling. When you hear that term, what do you think about? A lot of people think about this, what's on the slide: poker, playing with chips. They might think about this, roulette, maybe a table game at a casino. Some of the audiences that have maybe been to a casino might think of slot machines. That's gambling. That's the sort of newest, trendiest form, if you will, of gambling. But chances are you've thought in your mind about gambling that looks like this. So gambling at a casino, maybe there's lots of noise, lots of sounds, lots of excitement, and granted, they are very fun. But how many people thought of this, right? So when I asked about gambling, how many people thought, oh, cell phones. Cell phones are gambling. Well, they are. They definitely are. There is a proliferation of apps available allowing you to gamble on your smartphone. And so I did a quick check, and this is taken from a week ago. So a week ago, I checked Google Play, which is like the Android store for those of you that have Android. And I wanted to see what are the top 50 grossing games and apps on Google Play. And I found that out of the top 50, 10 of them had to do with gambling. So you see Slotsomania, Bingo Blitz, Jack Party, Big Fish Casino. And these are the top grossing games. That means that the makers of these games are making a lot of money. But that also means that a lot of people are spending a lot of money on these games. So they're definitely widely available on your cell phone. The other thing you should think about when you think about gambling is the computer. How many think about that? It is definitely a source for gambling. And so again, last week I wanted to see, what is available in terms of apps on Facebook. Most people have Facebook. There are games on there. What are some popular games? Well, lo and behold, if you look to the left, you will see that there are specific categories for gambling-related games on Facebook. That's how popular they are. And I clicked on the slots one here, and you can see that for Slotsmate, which is a free app, there are over 464,000 players playing this. This Slots Heart, apparently my friend Doug plays that one. So it's they are not they're not some minority app to be ignored. They're very popular. So what is gambling? I mean, simply put, gambling is the wagering of money or something of value on an event with an uncertain outcome with the primary intent of winning money or material goods. And so when we think about gambling, a lot of people think about lottery tickets, raffle tickets, even instant win tickets, electronic gambling like those slot machines. Internet gambling, as I mentioned, is a big form. Internet gaming, and that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. But social gaming and gambling, sports betting, casino table games, bingo, horse race betting, high risk stocks, and then there's other forms of gambling that you might not even think about, including animal fights and political events. But the reason I'm really here today is to talk about sort of the technological revolution that's overtaking gambling. We're sort of going through a period of unprecedented growth within the sort of gambling sphere. And a lot of that's due to this problem that, the operators of traditional gambling products aren't really sure how to attract the younger crowds. They seem to not, the millennials and the generation under that seem to really not be interested in gambling. And so they're scrambling, trying to figure out how do we get millennials interested so that our revenues continue to grow. And part of the way they've done that is by blurring gambling and gaming. Now, I talked about the definition of gambling. It was with the primary intent to win money or something of value. And when you consider something of value, that really opens up the definition of gambling to include gaming. So here, I just want to be clear about terminology. When I say gambling, the primary difference between gambling and gaming is that gambling involves a chance. So it's, the outcome of the gamble is due to randomness and chance primarily. Whereas with gaming, it's due to skill. So you control the gaming. It's your choices that determine sort of the outcome of the game. With gambling, again, typically you're winning money. So physical fiat currency that you can hold and cash and put in your bank account. Whereas with gaming, well, you can do that in some aspects, which I'll talk about. Mostly in gaming, you get virtual currency or virtual points, something like that, which could equally be as valuable to you if you really like that game. But there seems to be this merging of gambling and gaming that's taking place. So there is gaming now that really resembles gambling in a lot of ways, and I'll talk about some of those. And then there's gambling that resembles gaming in a number of ways. And this merge is really important, and I have some stats at the end sort of about how frequently people are gaming on campuses. But suffice to say, these are both very popular activities on campuses. So first, we're going to talk about gaming that resembles gambling. So again, these are like video games you can think that kind of resemble in some way or some fashion traditional gambling games. So just take a look at this picture. What is this? Is this a game that somebody's playing for fun to maybe win some points, or is this gambling for somebody trying to win some money? If you can see down here, hidden under this little play bar, somebody's playing a video here, but there's a spin button. There seems to be plus and minuses, so you can clearly wager somehow on this. So is it gambling? Is it gaming? I have no idea. I've never seen this before. It sure looks like a game, but then again, it also sort of looks like gambling. It looks a little bit like a slot machine or an electronic gambling machine. And so these games are referred to as social casino games. They're also referred to as free-to-play games. And these are a lot of the games that you see on Facebook or some of the apps where you can download the game, you can play it, you can play SpongeBob slots, for example, and you win points, right? You're betting points, you're winning points. Sometimes the points have a conversion into virtual cents that you can play with. But really what you're doing is you're playing for points and for prestige, because a lot of these social casino games, you're linked up to your friends, so your friends can see how you're doing on SpongeBob slots, and maybe you compete against who's the best SpongeBob slots player out there in your group of friends. So, you know, there is this sort of the leaderboards and prestige associated with social casino games, especially when it comes to the poker type ones. But again, I mentioned these were the top grossing games on Google Android. So how does that work? They're free to play. Yes, they are free to play, but embedded within these games is something called microtransactions. And basically, microtransactions are a way for the developer of the game that they've given away for free to make some money off the game. And so what typically happens is in any sort of these games is you're given a certain number of points to begin with. Say you're given 1,000 points to gamble with. And you're gambling away, you're winning money, you're losing money, you're in the zone, suddenly you run out of money. Well, in order to get another 1,000 points, you could either typically do something like wait 24 hours or complete a survey, or you can go ahead and buy some more of those points that you're virtually gambling with for real money. So here you see 50,000 points on this game is worth $5 US. And so by doing this, the maker of the game can make real money off you betting virtual points. And I don't talk about it here, but there is some research that shows that people that are willing to do these microtransactions and buy virtual points for their casino-like game are more likely then to actually go ahead and start gambling for real money, because they think, you know, I'm already spending money on these virtual points and I'm not winning any money back, but I'm doing really well. So therefore, I might as well go ahead and start actually gambling with real money and have the chance to win real money. Why would I do this virtually? So there seems to be some research on that. The other way that gaming is starting to look a lot like gambling is with these open world games. So in this top left corner, you can see there's somebody playing at a casino, and that is in within a game called Grand Theft Auto, which I'm sure you've heard of. But it's an open world game where you can do anything. You can go to the bank, you can rob a bank, you can deposit money in the bank, you can go to a movie theater, but also within the game, you can go into the casino, and there you can bet with virtual money for the game and win virtual money, which you could then spend on other items. In Grand Theft Auto, let's say, you know, a car, for example. And so you have gambling really embedded within these games that everybody plays. These are very popular games, and gambling is very popular within them. Another way that gaming is starting to really resemble gambling is with these things called loot boxes. I'm sure you've heard of them. They've been in the news a lot lately. So let me back up and sort of just explain what loot boxes are. So typically when you're gaming, you can get items in the game, and some of these items may make your character look differently. They're called skins. They make items look differently. They don't make your player behave any differently, but it makes their appearance change. And some of these skins are very rare. Typically, in order to get this skin, let's say it's a pair of neon pants for your character. So typically, to get these neon pants, these very rare neon pants, you'd have to be really good in the game. You'd have to, you know, fight the extra boss and do all these weird quests, and then you'd be rewarded with these neon pants, and your character would wear them in the game, and that would signal to other characters, wow, that's a good player because he's got this very rare neon pants. Well, all of a sudden, those became a commodity, these skins, and so there's a whole market, which I'll talk about next, where you can buy and sell, you know, your virtual items for real money. But game designers doing what they do, they want to make more money off their games. So what they introduced is loot boxes, and you purchase a loot box, you can purchase a loot box with real money, and a lot of people do. And when you open the loot box, it will give you some randomly generated skins. Once in a while, you'll get the sort of neon pants. You'll get a really good item. Most of the items are just mundane, but people are really obsessed to opening these loot boxes. When you open them, it's very much like gambling in the sense of you don't know what you're going to get. There's a lot of anticipation and build up, and oftentimes you don't win very big. You win little things, but sometimes you win very big. And so there's like this idea of the jackpot. You know, I've got a really good loot box that I open. And so people can become really addicted to these things and spend a lot of money on loot boxes. And so that's what they are. But then I mentioned that there's this whole secondary market where, let's say from a loot box or from doing something really good in the game, you got those neon pants. Well, other people want them. And let's say I don't really want these neon pants. Maybe I have 2 pairs for my character. I can go and sell one, right, for real money, and people will pay real money to get that skin. Well, of course, the next logical step is, well, why don't we gamble with those skins? You know, they're worth real money. And so these whole sort of underground, semi-illegal markets have come up where you can bet with your skins, or you can sort of enter the bet with real money as well, and you can win and trade and gamble with these gaming objects. So that was gaming that resembles gambling. Now I want to talk about a little bit about how gambling resembles gaming. So one of the more popular things to try to draw in a younger crowd is to make traditional gambling games look a lot like gaming. So you'll see some Angry Birds slots here. One of the most popular slots that you see in the top right, that's Wheel of Fortune, which is a game, but it's a sort of bonus round, and it's very popular. And here you see something that in the bottom right, something that really resembles sort of Candy Crush. So traditional gambling are taking on gaming themes. Oftentimes, if you're gambling at a real casino online for real money, they will also have the option of doing practice spins or playing for fun, or have a demo mode where you can play their online games, gambling games, with fake money. And what happens there in the demo modes, research suggests that oftentimes the odds are inflated in your favor. So when you're playing with these sort of practice modes without real money, that you're suddenly winning a lot, and you think, well, now I'm going to switch to play for real because clearly I'm great at gambling. So having these sort of game or demo modes within gambling, again, makes it feel a little bit like gaming when you're actually gambling. And then here we'll see, you know, I was talking and just mentioned about these online casinos. Well, some of these online casinos are becoming very immersive. In the early days, they were basic, you know, like a 2D, two-dimensional slot machine on your desktop that didn't really look anything like real life. But now you can enter whole virtual casinos. You can do it with virtual reality. You can, you know, play at a poker table with other people from around the world and see their avatars and see how they're playing. And sort of that's what you see in the top right. Those are all real people. That's real gambling taking place in real time in a virtual environment. So these virtual reality casinos or virtual casinos are really starting to look a lot like the games, right? So before I showed you the mini gambling games within gaming, and this looks a lot like that. And could you tell me the difference if I showed you a picture? Could you tell me what's gambling within a game and what's gaming that looks like, or what's gambling that looks like gaming? It gets very confusing. And the last way that gambling is sort of blurring is with esports gambling. So I'm not sure who on the line knows about esports, but esports stands for electronic sports. So just like any sport, basketball, baseball, when professional level players are playing against each other, there are spectators that are going to want to watch how that game plays out. So basketball, professional NBA basketball players have basketball fans. Well, it's the same with sports, electronic gaming sort of sports. So a lot of these games have sort of head-to-head competition or teams that play each other, and you can get really good at the game, and you can have professional level, even university-sponsored esports teams. And of course, just like anything where there's a lot of spectators and, you know, a lot of passions flare, you get a lot of gambling, right? So sports betting is very popular. Well, esports betting or esports gambling is also increasingly popular. And so some of the reasons with this blurring between gaming and gambling is that it really normalizes the gambling process. So, you know, games start to look very similar to gambling. Gambling starts to look like games, and games are something that are very social, very fun. They're, you know, it's a popular thing to do. And so, you know, by having this blurring of the two, one normalizes the other. And fun fact, so the industry, the gambling industry, so traditional slot machines, they have moved away from the gambling terminology. You'll often hear them refer to what they do in the casinos as gaming, right? People come to the casino and they're gaming patrons. The reason they did that, this was a move that was done, decades ago, but they found that there was the negative stigma and association attached with the word gambling. So they started calling what they did gaming as well. So that goes to my third point here, that terminology really matters, that there is a blurring between what is gaming and what is gambling, and they're often used interchangeably and wrong. And of course, the normalization, what are going to be the effects of people that grow up with this being normalized, right? So if gambling is a central component of many games, open world games, then how does that influence the attitudes of those young people playing those video games to think about gambling? Are they going to be more likely to do it or not? And we sort of need the research to show, is that going to be the case, or are they going to be sort of inoculized to it and just sort of, oh, it's just gambling, like that's nothing, and it's nothing special that I'm interested in. So, I mean, research still needs to play that out. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, there's inflated odds and payouts when you're not gaming with real money, and often those odds change when you start gambling with real money. So, people playing these sort of demo games or these fun games think, wow, I'm really good at gambling with virtual money in these games, and so therefore, why wouldn't I start gambling with real money? And of course, that could lead to increased risk taking and all sorts of erroneous cognitions about how gambling actually works when you go to do it with real money. And then again, these microtransactions really normalize spending, and as I mentioned, there's a migration to gambling, that if you're willing to spend money on a game that sort of looks like a casino game, why not play the real thing? And there are other emerging technologies with this sort of technological revolution and the blurring of gaming and gambling. So the first is prop betting, and prop betting is getting increasingly popular. This is where you gamble on something other than the outcome of a game. So traditional sports betting, especially in Canada, let me back up. In Canada, sports betting is pari-mutuel. So in order to bet on bet and win in sports betting in Canada, you need to get correct the outcome of 3 or more games, and obviously the more games you bet on, the higher your chances of the higher the amount that you can win, but the lower your chances are of winning. So the reason that Canada did that is there's a concern for match fixing, right? So if a lot of people can gamble on one game, maybe somebody plays off a player, and maybe that player misses a goal to throw the game, and so you can have this sort of match fixing that goes on as a result of gambling. And so Canada didn't want that. So they said, it's harder to fix 3 matches, 3 separate games, than it is one. So we're going to make it so that people can only bet legally in Canada on 3 games, 3 or more games at once. That that might be changing. In the U.S., sports betting has now become legalized, and they do single event sports betting, so betting on a single event. And we might expect that to come to Canada sometime in the near future. But interestingly, there's also proposition betting. So this doesn't have to do with the outcome of a game. This is, who will have the first penalty, who will make the first field goal kick. But you can also get into very exotic prop bets. And these are prop bets that have nothing whatsoever to do with sports at all. So again, in the top right, you'll see Trump prop bets. And these are things like, will Trump end up building the wall, or what are the chances he builds the wall by this certain time, or will Trump be found guilty of colluding with Russians? And you can bet on those, and they give real odds, and you can win real money. And prop bets are legal in Canada because you're not betting on the outcome of a game, you're betting on something else. So casinos offer that. And that's becoming very popular. Now, I'll also mention that prop bets can appeal to a market that traditional sports betting doesn't. So a lot of prop bets have to do with social media, like who's going to get voted off the next survivor, who's going to be the next survivor voted off the island, or what's going to happen in this series next. So they're a very fun way to draw in a lot of people that wouldn't typically gamble or bet. There's another part to this whole sports betting So I mentioned that you can bet on the outcome of the game. You can bet on proposition betting is betting on anything but the outcome of the game, but there's also live action betting, and this is real-time betting. So as you're watching the game in real life or on your phone or on your computer, you can start betting. Like, what's going to happen next? Will blank who has the ball, will he score? And they give odds, real-time odds where you can bet. And this has become a very popular pastime with people that are watching sports because it gets them really involved in the game and immersed in the game, especially if they don't have any sort of other reasons to enjoy the game. If it's not your favorite team, maybe, but you still want to watch some sports, well, maybe you do some live action betting, and that helps you get immersed within the game, as it were. And I won't get too into this, but there's also some developments with gambling with blockchain, and blockchain is what cryptocurrency is based off of. So you can think Bitcoin. There are these new casinos where you can bet with Bitcoin. There are advantages and disadvantages to them. There are arguments being made that they're the next big thing because of the way cryptocurrencies work and because of the way that blockchain works. You can't. There's basically zero fraud. And also the house edge, so how much a casino takes in terms of profits, is a lot lower for blockchain and cryptocurrency casinos for numerous reasons that would take me too long to get into. But it's an interesting development to watch out for. But also, with this technological revolution becomes technological advances in the treatment and prevention of gambling. So here you can see there's a gambling therapy is an app designed to help problem gamblers. In the bottom right, you'll see Bet Filter, which is a blocking software which you can download for your phone or your computer, and it blocks access to online gambling sites. In the top right is an app called BetMinder, which is still in development that Griot is helping to build with Credit Canada, helping people to manage their finances when they're gambling, so that they can stay within their limits and their budget. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in the sort of gambling, gaming, technological revolution sphere, and it has implications for campus mental health. So 75% of post-secondary students have gambled within the past year. It's very popular, especially among those that are campus aged. 90% of 16 to 24-year-olds report playing video games in the past year. So with, again, the blurring of gaming and gambling, that's a lot of people that can be exposed to gambling in one way or another. 10% of post-secondary students experience problem gambling, and 60% of post-secondary students experience pathological gambling, which is sort of the most severe typology of gambling. So, I mean, 10% of post-secondary students experience problem gambling. That's 1 in 10. It's not an insignificant amount. The other thing to know is that video gamers are more likely to gamble than non-video gamers. So again, 90% of campus-age students are video gamers. So, research suggests that they might be more likely to be the ones that are actually gambling. International students are particularly vulnerable to engaging in problem gambling behavior. This can be for a number of reasons, such as acculturation, right? If they're international students and they haven't been, getting adjusted to the Canadian culture, might be a risk factor. There might be other ethnocultural factors that come into play there. But all that to say is that, insofar as colleges and universities are increasing the number of international students that are coming in, that's something to be aware of as well. There are some harms. These are the common harms from gambling among university-age students, include sort of lost sleep, missed classes, poor grades, and of course, loss of money, loss of transportation, loss of accommodation. So, if you care about your students getting the best grades that they can and not missing classes, then you might want to consider sort of policies surrounding gambling on campus. And here's the thing about that is only 6% of Canadian universities actually have a policy in their student manual on gambling. And only one fourth of Canadian universities have gambling policies in their student residences. So compare that to the policies surrounding drug use or alcohol use, which is upwards of 95% at most Canadian universities. It's striking that there aren't explicit policies on gambling within Canadian universities or student residences. But also, research shows that colleges and universities don't really have the resources or infrastructure to address gambling harm. Gambling is interesting in that it's often not seen as a mental health issue, it's seen as an addiction. But if you talk to the people that work in addiction, sometimes they'll say gambling isn't, a real addiction, that it's more of a mental health issue. So sometimes gambling can fall in between the tracks, or fall in, sorry. Sometimes gambling can what's that? What am I trying to say here? Can fall in between the cracks. That's what I'm trying to say. So sometimes gambling can fall in between the cracks, and so it's just something to be aware of. And then among young people, gambling and gambling harm is connected to sort of drinking, drug abuse, unsafe sex, and problematic internet use. And when people thought about gambling in the past and gambling harms, it used to be really framed within the individual. It's an individual problem with financial consequences. Well, the research is showing that really it's not about the individual at all. It's about all these different things. So this is our gambling harms mind map. And this just outlines some of the most important factors that sort of are associated with gambling and gambling harms. Let me just take you through a couple here. So the first might be mental health. So there's high rates of comorbidity between depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, and suicide ideation and gambling. So if you're experiencing gambling harms, chances are you might have other mental health issues. In terms of substance use and addiction, we have alcohol, smoking, and other substances. I already sort of mentioned that previously, but I just want to reiterate here, especially with the legalization of cannabis, that might be an issue that you might want to pay attention to. And the last one is sort of other health risks. So, people with gambling problems are 2 times more likely to report sedentary behavior, so not being active, not moving. They're 3 times more likely to be obese, and so in terms of healthy eating on campuses and having healthy students at your university, again associated with gambling and gambling harms. And so we have this whole mind map, and you can look at it here. It just outlines some of the other things that are associated, some of the other factors that are associated with gambling. But age, again, youth, young adults might be particularly vulnerable. I mentioned the ethnocultural factors when it came to international students, but even things like socioeconomic status, right? So people with lower income tend to spend proportionally more of their income on gambling activities, and so can face more financial consequences as a result. And so now I want to come to what you can do. So we have funding, and if you like money, you can apply to what it's called our BET community initiative. So BET stands for Build, Engage, and Translate. And what it really is these programs, the sort of BET initiatives, are designed to help you assess or address gambling harm in some way within your organization. So this doesn't have to be focused solely on gambling. Again, gambling is associated with everything from gaming, internet use, health behaviors, other mental health. So if your initiative focuses on any of those or touches on anything related to those harm maps, you can apply to this. And gambling is definitely related in some way to that focus. So you can apply. We have a $15,000 pilot streams, and then we have $40,000 scale-up streams for proven knowledge translation approaches to addressing harm from gambling. So please do consider applying to us. We will help you. We will help you with the application process. We will help you with the implementation of any initiative to help address or assess gambling harm within your organization. So please don't be scared, and please contact me if you have any questions about that. And that's it. So I sort of blew through that pretty quickly. I realize there's sort of 20 minutes left, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Travis. That was a really great presentation. I think everyone's ears sort of perked up when you said, if you like money, we have funding. So thanks for that. And for all of you who are watching the webinar, now's the time to take up questions. So if you have any questions, any comments, or any thoughts about anything that Travis has been talking about, please type them into the question function of the menu, or you can type them to the chat. It doesn't matter, and I'll start taking them up right now. So one of the things that I had a question about, Travis, is that if you're a counselor or a frontline worker working on campus, and students are coming into you and they're talking about perhaps they're having a problem, they're struggling with a gaming or gambling addiction, like, does GRIO have any resources, or like do you provide any place for counselors to refer students to, or what role does your organization play in that?
Yeah, so our organization doesn't do, provide treatment itself. We can definitely, send you links to other organizations that offer gambling, but the best bet usually is to call. There's a gambling support helpline, and they can connect you with treatment providers. If you're interested in resources to help with gambling, we can definitely point you in the right direction and provide you with resources. A lot of great resources coming out of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CICMH, produces a lot of great treatment-focused and counselor-focused tools and resources to help with gambling issues. But yeah, I mean, we don't, there's definitely a paucity, a lack of research on gambling among campuses, and what are the impacts on academic performance, and what, since sports betting is so popular, what are the implications for student athletes? I mean, that's a big thing. We know gambling's happening, and we know gambling's happening on university level games, but what impact does that have on the individuals? What impact does that have on the university as a whole? Still needs to be sort of researched.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions rolling in now. One of the questions is, do you know what kinds of therapy may be more helpful than others?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar to the types of therapies for other addictions. CBT, obviously, and behavioral approaches are the most popular. Having said that, there is a brand new resource. It's a manual for doing mindfulness-based therapy for gambling problems. It comes out of CICMH, but we help to fund that going forward. So mindfulness has definitely is sort of a promising avenue going forward. There's also specific programs that are targeted towards gamblers that really look at correcting erroneous cognitions. So, I mentioned that some people can develop these irrational beliefs about control, right? So if they do X, Y, and Z, they can control the outcome of a game. Or they believe that, if I got heads 5 times in a row on a coin flip, that that a tails is more likely to come up, and that's called the gambler's fallacy. So there's these very specific cognitions and beliefs surrounding gambling, and there are modules that can help correct some of those irrational beliefs about gambling. So that within a CBT framework, there are other specific modules that sort of really target those types of beliefs, but the research shows that really CBT is the most successful. Having said that, it's also the one type of therapy that's designed, I'll say, with them quotes, designed to be studied for effectiveness. So when you look at effectiveness studies of therapy types, you often see CBT coming up as one of the more successful ones, but that's only because it's easier to measure success in CBT. So anyway, just leave that with that caveat, as it were.
All right, thank you, Travis. And we have I'm not sure that I understand this question, but perhaps you might understand this question, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. Question is, I'm wondering if this webinar has been approved for CEUs from the Canadian Problem Gambling Certification Board and or the Canadian Addiction Counselor Certification Federation. So I'm not familiar with all of these bodies.
We don't have accreditation for this webinar, we could look into possibly getting accreditation. There would probably need to be, so CEU's continuing education, or what, see, anyway, we would need accreditation to get continuing education credits. But that's something we could look into. Again, it would probably have to have some additional information about actual, counseling and types of counseling that might be appropriate. But yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I guess it's something that we can look into in the future. Another question: do you think the terminology of gambling will change to gambling eventually, since the word gambling has a lot of stigma surrounding it?
Yeah. So there's a great what's the name of it? There is a program out there called Gambling. Right now, it's put on by, I forget the organization. I believe it's YGAP. Anyway, they give a great webinar on just the fact that gaming and gambling are becoming so intertwined. But it'll be interesting to see how the terminology changes with time. Again, it's moved away from this gambling. And I should mention too that there is a lot of stigma associated with gambling still, even though it's been legal for ages. If you say you're having gambling problems, one of the main barriers for treatment is that sort of stigma. And by changing the terminology into more gaming terminology, maybe that might help reduce the stigma and encourage people to go seek help. I'm not really sure on that one. We'll see what happens. Marketers for the gambling industry are always coming up with new and innovative ways to promote their products. So I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that's a very interesting point of discussion, because as you mentioned earlier, that gambling and gaming do sort of occupy that little space in which some providers may feel, oh, it's not quite a substance use problem, and it's, for some people, it's not quite a mental health problem either. So how, as a counselor, like, how are you going to move forward with that? So I think the terminology is going to be quite key in addressing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because it's very rare that you'll find somebody with gambling problems and that's their only problem, right? Usually there's usually something else going on, right? People are gambling for reasons other than just winning a lot of money, whether that fills a need to sort of escape from stresses and pressures in life, to to different thrills, maybe they're reward seeking for some reason, and addressing the underlying issues can really help address the gambling problems. But I'm not a counselor, so I would defer to counselors to talk more about specific treatment issues.
And another, not really a question, but somebody has said, if anyone's interested, the Responsible Gambling Council offers a gambling awareness program on campuses across Ontario every fall and winter. Travis, did you know about this campaign, actually?
Yeah, so it's great. It's called Brain Game, and we're actually funding through, I believe it's through a BET program. It might be one of our other programs, but we're currently funding a researcher to help translate knowledge about cannabis into that brain game. So it's coming to campuses, and they do a great job. They've done it for many years. They'll do it at lunchtime or during assembly. But yeah, there's going to be some new and updated information about cannabis as well as gambling within the brain game course, and not course, but activity workshop. There you go.
And what does, I know that you're not running this program, but do you know more about what exactly is involved in that awareness program?
Yeah, I think from what I understand, it's very interactive, and so they get people to really, I believe what they do, don't quote me on this, is they present in real time some of the sort of gambling fallacies. They get people to show how luck and illusions of control sort of develop within gambling, and really go to sort of explain, some of the underlying mechanisms that people aren't aware of, that explain how gambling works. So, people don't understand, for example, randomness. It's a very hard construct to wrap your head around, and people don't know, for example, that slot machines, when they're not being used, they're constantly generating random numbers, like millions of numbers a second. And so those numbers then correspond to the outcome that you'll see on the slot machine. And so people think, well, what if I got up from my seat and then somebody else sat down and they won? Like I just put a bunch of that money into that machine. Like they're going to win my jackpot. But the thing is, you would have had to press the button at the exact same 1/1,000,000th of a second as that person that sat down at the slot machine in order to win that big jackpot. So it's not at all related in any way to how much you've fed the machine. It's not, ever going to be quote unquote ready to pay out. So that sort of thing. I think, long story short, I'm pretty sure that's a little bit of what the problem gambling awareness program offered by Responsible Gambling Council sort of deals with.
Yeah, and we actually have somebody from the Responsible Gambling Council who's on this webinar, and she says, just a point of clarification, the college and university program is called Know the Score 2. Game Brain is a program for high school students. So thanks, Lisa.
Sorry about
that. Another question. Is anything known about if students gambling with their OSAP money is a problem?
That would be great research. Not that I know of, not that I've come across. In terms of, I'm sure all heard stories of extravagant spending with OSAP money, on unnecessary items. So I wouldn't be surprised if students are gambling with their OSAP money. Is that a concern? Does gambling peak when OSAP money is given? That's an empirical question that could be answered, and I would support any research that looks into that going forward.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of research, I know you touched a little bit on this in your presentation about how gambling and gaming habits might be affecting post-secondary students, but do you have any specific stats to share in things like academics, grades, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, not in the specifics. Most of the research that's been done on university sort of aged individuals has been done in the U.S. There has been some done at McGill and a little bit done in Ontario, but in terms of actual stats, to what extent does gambling, affect grades, and if so, how much? We don't really know. But likewise, we don't really know with gaming either, right? So a big issue is sort of gaming addiction, video game addiction, or internet addiction. Those are becoming really hot topics, and yeah, some people spend way too much time playing video games and not studying. And the same could be said with gambling. So it's definitely something to look for.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Travis. And I think that was our last question, unless we have any more last-minute things coming in. But I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and sharing the work of your organization. That was a really interesting presentation. I don't think that the intersection between gambling and gaming is something that most people have really sat down to consider before. So thanks for clarifying that for us. And I see there on your slide you have your contact information, so I'm assuming that if anyone has more specific questions, it'll be okay to reach out to you.
Please do.
Well, thank you so much once again, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you.
And one last thing before we go, though, for everyone, is that our next webinar is with jack.org, and that's happening on March 28th. And it's going to provide an overview of tips and tricks to increase student engagement on campus. So do check our website for the registration link, and don't forget the survey that is going to pop up in the webinar. Thanks for watching.
Bye.